How can a person manage trauma triggers?
Ah, yes. Trauma triggers tend to be automatic, and it's not just that you're reminded of what happened, you relive it. You're back in that moment because the amygdala in your brain just has this perfect memory, and boom, it's like you're reliving. And so the trauma triggers are very intense. They're not a normal memory. A normal memory is just you remember, and it's not associated with any physical or emotional overlay. Before I go on to that, triggers are very specific, and they can be things that are utterly benign to anybody else. I had a client years ago. She was 17. At the age of 14, her mother's lodger made her pregnant, and she was kept off school. Nobody knew she was pregnant. It was hidden. And when the baby was born, the chap took her upstairs, helped her to give birth, and then drowned the baby in the bath and buried it in a field. Now, I used to see her in the evening, and at that time, because, she had a little job, I thought I'd give her a cup of tea. I handed her a cup of tea. There were bubbles on top of the cup of tea, as sometimes happens. She nearly fainted. She went, "Oh, bubbles." And I stupidly didn't understand, what have I done to this poor girl? But my supervisor said, well, if you were seeing your baby being drowned in the bath, you would see bubbles. And so that's a perfectly innocuous stimulus. Who would get traumatized by bubbles on top of a cup of tea? Well, she did. And so it's very specific to the actual traumatizing experience, and other people may not understand. I didn't even understand. And so that's the important thing about triggers. They're specific, they're personal, they are absolutely related to the trauma. And if you can get to understand how the triggers are related to the trauma, that can help. So again, the first step is to be aware, to notice that you're being triggered. And this is where meditation and mindfulness can help, because mindfulness means that you notice but you don't react. So when you get triggered, obviously you are reacting. But if part of you can be an observer and go, oh, look at me reacting to that, what's that about? And be curious and get to learn what your reactions are and what sets you off, that can be very helpful. Now, there's a theory called polyvagal theory, which I won't go into here, but it has a lot to say about fight and flight and triggers and calm states and so on, because there are different states of the nervous system. And so to manage triggers, it's about getting into a calm state rather than a triggered state. And breathing exercises are actually very helpful. I teach very simple breathing exercises but you need to breathe into your belly, not your chest, because that'll just make, not the top of your chest, that'll make you anxious. So diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing really can help. Getting a good night's sleep helps, but when you're traumatized, you often wake up from nightmares. And there is a dream completion approach that I can go through with people, and it's available on YouTube actually, that can help people suffering from nightmares get a good night's sleep by managing the nightmares. And I was going to mention here what you've already brought up, Sharon, is that drinking and drugs, drug taking, are very, very common forms of self-medication. So you don't get triggered. You're too, out of your mind to react. Not recommended, but a lot of people do it. And as we've already said, getting off the addiction is often needed alongside of your therapy in a very specialist way. If it's a deeply entrenched thing, it can happen in therapy if it's not too entrenched. Obviously, the therapy, particularly the therapy that I do, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy, which you've mentioned, EMDR therapy, it actually changes the brain, rewires the brain, so that the amygdala, which is the bit that gets triggered, the memories are released from the amygdala and go up to the cortex and become normal memories that are not, like, you still remember what happened, but you don't get upset by it. And then what is interesting, I used to think that was that because it was such a terrible experience, you'd never forget it. But one of my clients said to me, now that it's gone to be a normal memory and isn't triggering, it is fading, because normal memories do fade. The brain's very efficient at what you don't need. It just eliminates, except the amygdala eliminates nothing. That's why we've got to get it out of the amygdala. And so if you get some EMDR therapy in particular, that can help the triggers actually stop happening.